Welcome back to the Bob Lefsetz podcast. My guest today is Jim Kerr of Simple Minds. Jim, so great to have you on the podcast. A real thrill.
The pleasure's mine, Bob. I've been a follower for a long time, as you may well know, the writings and then eventually the podcast. So I'm really looking forward to the chat and thrilled that you invited me.
So how'd you end up living in Sicily?
It's a heck of a long story, Bob, but it's really a love affair that began with Italy. I was very fortunate in the sense that my parents sent me on a school trip to Italy when I was 13. And even then, I mean, compared to Glasgow, the city that I'm from, growing up there in the 60s, early 70s, I think the best way to describe it is to say that it was a monochrome existence. And as soon as I got off on the plane in it, and I said, well, you know what? When I'm an old geezer, I'm going to come and live here one day. I always had it in my mind. However, at the age of about 20, we're very fortunate not only to be in a band, but in a band that was already getting quite a lot of traction throughout Europe. Italy was one of the first places that embraced my band. And I got to know the country very well, north and south. Now, the south is a different deal from the rest of the country. Back then, everyone says, you don't want to be going down there. You don't want to be playing down there. The mafia will steal your guitars. The mafia will steal this. You'll have a horrible time. Well, we went down, had the time of our lives. And how many years now? Well, oh my gosh, 30 years more. Sicily's been a part of my life. Lately, I mean, I am now fully Italian resident. Brexit was the final straw for me there. I thought, no, I'm not being dragged out of Europe by some buffoon. And so I am, you could say I'm almost Italian national, which not many people emigrate to Sicily. It's usually a history of emigrating from Sicily. But I'm very fortunate the people there accepted me, and there's stories within stories within stories.
Okay, why Sicily as opposed to, shall we say, the mainland?
I think the best way to say this, I mean, it's a bit of a vague word, but Sicily is cosmic. The history of Sicily, I mean, that's where it all kicked off. That's gone back to, way before the Romans. It's the Greeks. It's an amazing place. I mean, where I am in Sicily, you could say that Africa's probably nearer than Rome. So you've got that continental drift. You've got all that history. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And right in the middle of the island, and there's a story there as well, there's this huge volcano, Mount Etna, that I see every day. My grandfather used to talk about it. He was in the Highland Infantry. He was in Sicily during the war. And I think he had the time of his life. Yeah, I think he had a story there as well, because every time he had a couple of whiskeys, he would go on about how beautiful the Italian women were and how great the Italian people were. And I would say, you were there in the war. What about the fighting? He said, I didn't fight with anyone. It's the greatest place. And he kind of planted a seed. You know, when you're kids and people are talking about volcanoes and all that stuff, I think he planted the seed. And all these years later, if only he would know, if only he could have known how things have ended up. So there's a lot of dots there. I haven't quite joined them up, but that's only the short answer.
Now, you own a hotel there?
Well, that's right. I think, let me see, around about 20 years ago, things weren't looking too great for Simple Minds. I mean, the wheels had come off. A new generation had come along. It's the expression you use a lot. Our cheese had been well and truly stolen. And to my songwriting partner, Charlie, he says I only felt this way for about 2 days. But I definitely felt plan B's needed. Now, as I already said to you, Italy was in my heart, and I thought it was a time when the career was going down, the tubes, divorces and all that had happened. I thought, I'm going to go down there for a year, get the language, see what evolves, and I thought, we've been doing this for 10, 12 years. Even the Beatles couldn't make it last more than 10 years, or didn't want it to last more than 10 years. I mean, the other thing, we also felt, we didn't feel we weren't embittered or anything like that. We felt, no one owes us anything. What a great time. Maybe that's it. So all that sounds very practical, but there is the other side. You think, well, who am I? What am I going to do? How do you be ex-Jim Kerr? How do you be ex-Simple Minds? How do you be an ex-rock star? There's not really a guidebook for that. But I thought, I'll go down and I'll just... Maybe I was in my Hemingway phase. I'll go down and I'll fish for tuna. I'll get the language. I'll fall in love. Well, I didn't fish for tuna. I did get the language, and inevitably I fell in love. There's always a woman involved, is there not? So there's always a lover involved. So all of that came to be, and I was loving it. I was staying in this friend's apartment, the basement of his place, and I felt so full of vitality. And I thought, this is the place for me. And just as I was thinking that, a piece of land became available next to us. And I thought, bed and breakfast, maybe I could make that work, because it had a planning permission. Now, I'm from a family of builders as well, back in Glasgow, and I spent a few years in building sites just before getting into music. And you can imagine when I told the bank manager back in Scotland, and when I told our accountant that I was going to buy land in Sicily and I was going to build what has become a hotel, they said I was crazy. They said it was the worst place. Italy was the worst place in Europe to invest. Sicily was the worst place in Italy to invest. And I said, okay, I hear you. I won't do it. I got up pretty much the next day and signed the papers. And we haven't looked back.
Okay, so why build as opposed to just buy something?
Well, the old hotels, they come with all these planning you can't get planning permissions. You know, when you go in those old ancient places, I mean, it's very hard to make it work in terms of, well, unless you've got gazillions. This place was available with a certain kind of planning permission for a certain kind of building. It's not the most beautiful building, but it has the most beautiful views. And that was a big part of it. And obviously I had friends there as well, a partner who, shall we say, had all the right contacts. And, you know, I mean, there's a whole book in that, but it wasn't all plain sailing. I mean, some nights I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat thinking, what the heck have I done here? But as soon as the place opened, it's been open now 20 years. People go there, with people who come 10, 15 years on the trot. They love it as much as I. God for that. It would be more like Fawlty Towers if I was involved in the running of it. It's run by professionals, and we keep adding to it as well. I have to say, during the 2 years of pandemic, obviously it was closed, and we keep adding to it. I mean, the future's calling, though. I'll have to decide the years to come. Just because it's my passion doesn't mean it's my kids' passion. And, you know, I'm not going to be here forever. So there are decisions to be made, but it's been great for me. As much as it's great at the end of the night, when people come to a concert and you send them home happy, revitalized, you can imagine that equally so, perhaps even more so, with people that come on holiday to a place, and you know, they come in from London, or they come in from Stockholm, or they come in from whatever, and you know, they look a bit grey and their shoulders are down, and a week later they're full of colour and revitalized, and to be of service is a great thing.
So how many rooms does it have, and how many people can stay at one time?
Well, when we started, it was 14. That was the original planning. We're up to just under 50 now. So, yeah, mostly double rooms.
And where do you live?
I live nearby. I mean, it's that thing. I don't go in every day, because you go in every day, you just see things that are wrong. People are having a whale of a time, but you just see things that are wrong. And you think, I told you to fix this last week, or, or haven't we got that together yet? I mean, that makes me sound like I'm a perfectionist. I'm not. And then I look around and I just see people chilled and having a great, great time. And I think, well, maybe it's not so bad. I mean, it's not I got to say, it's not some rock star shishi hotel. It's a nice place. It's got soul. People feel good sitting there. And so, sometimes I do a blitz. I go in when they're least expecting me. I don't tell them when I'm going in.
Let's go back to your inspiration for building it. At the moment, you thought Simple Minds was reaching the end of its line. If Simple Minds had reached the end of its line, how are you doing financially? Obviously, you need something to occupy your time, but were you set for life when Simple Minds was, up in the air?
Well, we were very fortunate because we'd been looked after, I have to say. I mean, we'd done well, particularly the last, say that was 12 years up until that time of thinking maybe the game's up here. Half of that, it was very lucrative. But as you know, a divorce here and a divorce there and a tax bill here and a tax bill there. But since I was young, I'd always made pretty good investments as well in properties. And we really had been looked after well. Good accountant, a woman called Sandra Dodds, who was probably more like Miss Jean Brodie. She was more like a head mistress to us, who kept us on the straight and narrow. She would tell you, what do you need 2 cars for? Are you crazy? What are you talking about, a boat? What's this? What's that? And she would basically kick her ass. And at the time, she would talk about pensions when we were, we were only 22. And you think, pension? I'll never be 65. Well, I'll be 63 next month. If we would have been okay had we remained sensible.
So we're in an era where people are selling their rights. Do you still own all your rights?
Just recently, up until just recently, Bob. But no, we have now sold our rights very recently.
So what happened recently?
It was time. There was an offer there. It was time. We looked at what the publishing had been bringing in. We looked at the offer. We looked at how we could be intelligent, the way we set that up. Over about a period of 2 years, it was a lot of back and forth. We thought about our kids. We thought about investments that we have and how we could possibly do better. We considered everything. It was time is basically the answer.
And who did you sell to?
BMG.
And did you sell 100% or do you still retain anything?
We sold 100%.
And that's the publishing. What about the record royalties?
The records, no, they're still there. But of course, we don't own our records. We get the royalties, as you say, but
right.
We don't own them.
So what'd you do with the money?
Haven't done anything yet, Bob. I bought some training shoes last week.
I guess what I'm saying is when you have publishing, they pay you every 6 months, probably your deal would be, even though they tend not to pay 100% of what you're owed. And then you get a check, you pay the taxes, and then you can put it in the stock market, you can leave it in cash. So, have you just left it in cash waiting to see, or have you invested it?
It's so recent, and we have conversations about it every week about what's the next move. But guarantee, we won't be going and spending it on Porsche cars, that's for sure. We're Scotsmen.
So why do Scots have the reputation of being cheap? Is that real?
No, it's not. It's something to do with Walt Disney, I think. One of those cartoon things where you would, I don't know. But in my experience, that is not. But we like to play up to it. We like to have fun with that. But it's certainly not real.
Okay. So prior to Brexit, Scotland was constantly talking about seceding from the UK. Now, subsequent to Brexit, they're talking again. What's your take on that?
I mean, it is a strange thing. We grew up, to tell you, we grew up in a place, industrial Britain, and everyone in Glasgow, really, there was only one party for us. It was the Labour Party. But that was the industrial age. And of course, you could say the political figure who presided over most of my generation's career was none other than Margaret Thatcher, who a lot of the working class would say was a nemesis. I mean, my take on it was that a lot of those old industries, people had stolen their cheese as well. Globalization came, shipbuilding could be done elsewhere. Iron could be done elsewhere. And a lot of these places didn't move with the times. And then they were left, the industries needing constant subsidies. Margaret Thatcher comes along and says, no, those days are gone. We're going to close all of this. Now, again, in a practical sense, comes to business, you would say, well, that's the way it goes. But there were communities left overnight, not even any empathy. I mean, I know you have that in the States as well, just nothing. So everyone I grew up with in Glasgow, I don't think hate is too strong a word here. They hated her, and they couldn't wait for the dawning of New Labour. And New Labour finally came with Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and people of my generation thought, okay, we'll see a much more sympathetic, we'll see a much more intelligent. But I have to say, from my perspective, by the time they came in, within weeks, it looked like that was a fallacy as well. Basically, the right and left, they had all come into the centre, into the middle. And in the case of Scotland, in the case of Glasgow, most of the population of Scotland's in the central belt. They turned their back on Labour, the war as well, and this idea that Blair was Bush's poodle didn't go down well. And the Scottish Nationals started to play a card then, and everyone, almost as a protest vote, because, no one was really thinking about what's the currency going to be? Is the oil going to run out? Everyone was just saying, we want nothing to do with these people in 10 Downing Street anymore. And to a degree, that's still the case. I mean, the true nationalists will tell you that Scotland can exist in the same way Denmark and Norway and Finland do. But let's be honest, Norway, Denmark and Finland have had a long time to practice it being Norway, Denmark and Finland. You can't just turn it overnight. There would be look at the upheaval with Brexit. I mean, there would be another colossal upheaval. People would really have to think about that. I don't know if they do. I mean, what we really would need, I think, with respect to the people that's in charge there just now, you would need a supervisionary to pull that off with some aplomb. I don't see that supervisionary from where I'm standing. But you got to remember, I'm not there anymore. I'm in Italy.
So you talk about living in Italy. We've been exposed for a long time of people who were tax exiles from the UK, the Stones, other acts. Are there tax advantages to you living in Italy?
I mean, a lot of the European countries now have incentives, but I would still pay a lot more tax in Italy than most Italian people.
Okay, and just to be very specific, irrelevant of Scotland's place in this, what do you think of Brexit?
Oh, horrendous. I mean, no one really took it serious. That's the problem. No one took it serious. And we woke up that day. I mean, I think I'm right in saying this. The biggest disappointment, I believe I'm right in saying this, the demograph. Young kids didn't turn out to vote, ironically, and it was their future that was at stake. Why they didn't turn out to vote? The anti-Brexit movements, they put together, there was no campaign. They just thought, this is a joke, it'll go away. And then I think we heard that about Trump as well, did we not, leading up to it? This is a joke. This isn't going to happen. This is not going to be. I mean, everyone seemed to be against him, the media, tech, you name it. Everyone was against him, it seemed, apart from a lot of people on the ground who wanted to kick out at something. That's what it looks like, Brexit. And I would imagine there'll be some parallels with the Trump vote.
Okay, now, there's all kinds of issues with visas and equipment now. In terms of your band members and equipment, are you sourcing that all from Europe, or do you have visa issues? Are you caught up in the Brexit world?
They tell me it's been a nightmare. They tell me everything is 10 times harder. That's coming from, our production guys. I mean, even today, I have to say, it's like a whole catalogue of stuff you got to deal with. I came off a bus today, 14-hour drive from Lausanne. Now you say, well, do you have to take the bus? No. Normally we wouldn't with that kind of drive. But traveling just now anywhere between just this chaos of air travel and airports trying to get their act together after the pandemic. But also, I mean, even getting on a plane 2 weeks ago to Oslo, when we turned up in Oslo, people with UK passports, we were in a queue with everyone else for about 50 minutes just trying to get into Oslo on a otherwise quiet Wednesday afternoon. Whereas for the last, all my entire life, you just walk through. So it's still, it just seems a real mess. It just seemed like, as you know, the slogan for Brexit was just get it done. And it sounds like as though that was all that was going to count. There was no thought about, and what's next, and what's next, and what's next. So everyone's left. Everyone who is traveling, everyone who does business internationally with Europe, is paying the cost right now, and it'll get sorted, but I don't see any rush towards that. I don't even know what it means. I have to say, I spend my time in Europe, of course. I live in Europe. Most of our friends. I find the whole thing embarrassing.
So you talk about this moment approximately 20 years ago. We said, hey, is there a future for Simple Minds? What turned you around and said, there is a future?
Well, funny enough, it probably about 2 years after turning up in Sicily and thinking those thoughts, nothing seemed to be on our side. We're without a record deal. We're without a publishing deal. We're without management. I really felt this is going to be a tough one. No one in the media was interested. But there was a couple of things came along. An amazing thing. Social network, where if you were a band and you had fans still in the world, you could talk to them direct. So you could say there was a glimmer of hope there. But actually what happened was the phone started to ring. If you're a good band, if you're a great band, and I would like to think we're certainly the former, and we challenge to be the latter every night, it seemed the phone would ring. People started asking us to play. Now, the thing was, but how are we going to play? What kind of things? I mean, I don't want to be disparaging, but we didn't want to do those 80s kind of sad, you know what I mean? All these 80s acts bundled together. We definitely didn't want to do that. So we turned a lot of things down. But what we did do was we started to write songs again. I mean, the real big thing was, at that point, you find out who you really are. And I'll say to you like this, if you're in the back of a van or minibus, driving past the stadium that you once sold out, en route to a club that is not sold out, you really find out a lot about yourself. First thing, you find out if you've got the stomach to continue. You ask why you do it. And you say, well, what's the answer to that? I remember when I was a kid, looking at the old blues guys, I think, you know, I mean, those guys didn't even get paid initially. For the longest time, John Lee Hooker and Chuck Berry and those guys did, and eventually B.B. King. But you looked at them, and they were the only old guys then, and it was written on their face why they did it. It's who they are. Well, we found out then that that's also who we were. We were by that time 15 years in. How do you stop writing songs when that's what you've done since you were 13? You somehow have to silence the voices that are telling you this is pointless. It's never going to be the same. It's never going to be what it was. And you have to decide, what are we going to do here? Are we going to go around like just punch-drunk boxers because we don't know what else to do? Or are we going to recommit like we did when we were kids? Now, when you're a kid and there's nothing else in your life, you're 18, you're 17, you commit everything. There's nothing else in your life. You can't believe you're getting the chance to make music night and day. That's all we ever wanted to do. We got a record deal. Finally, that was possible. But then, you know, you get older and you've got to have room in your life for other kids. Success comes along. You get some money. You live in a much softer. Are you going to turn your back on all that and go into a crappy old rehearsal room again and re-engage and go in there Monday to Friday and work through back to the songs, back to try and make the band great again, back to finding a great manager, back to finding a great agent? Are you really going to engage when you don't have to, because you've got enough pasta? You've got enough of, you know, there's billionaires out there, but I'm very fortunate in as much that for 99% of the time in my life, I've always felt rich because I always felt I had enough. And when I say I had enough, it's more than 99% of the people I went to school with. So the thing was, can we engage? Can we really try and draw something out of ourselves here? And that's what we decided to do. We were flatlining. We had to get up. We had to get off the table. We had to get the ignition going again. We had to turn the car around, get it going in the right direction. And then we had to find out how many miles we could take it down the road. And, well, here we are, 15, 18 years later. And it's gone down the road and it's gone great.
Tickets for our 2022 iHeartRadio Music Festival are on sale now at AXS.com. See Halsey, Megan Thee Stallion, Nicki Minaj, Sam Smith, Black Eyed Peas, Diplo, and so many more, all on one stage.
Iconic names from all genres of music.
Avril Lavigne,
Lionel Richie, LL Cool J, Luke Combs, Marcus Mumford,
Maren Morris,
Morgan Wallen,
Pat Benatar,
The Black Keys.
A weekend full of superstar performances, never seen before collaborations, and once-in-a-lifetime moments you'll have to see to believe.
Friday, September 23rd and Saturday the 24th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas.
iHeartRadio, let's go!
Our 2022 iHeartRadio Music Festival.
Buy your tickets now at AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
The Pod Meets World podcast takes you back in time to 1993 for the ultimate Boy Meets World rewatch. Join original cast members Danielle Fishel, Will Friedle, and Ryder Strong as they relive every episode, sharing memories, behind-the-scenes info, and more.
None of us have seen an episode since it aired back in the 90s, so we'll be witnessing our middle part haircuts, hooded t-shirts, and teenage overacting for basically the first time right along with you.
You'll get a fresh perspective on all your favorite moments from the crew at John Adams High.
From the neighborly advice of Mr. Feeney,
to plays with squirrels,
to cutting my hair on TV for the very first time,
to that time I joined a cult.
We'll break down the good, the bad, and the nostalgic ugly.
Do it all over again with Topanga, Eric, and Sean. Your first crush, your first kiss, those world-shaking moments, and all those life lessons. It's everything a Boy Meets World fan could ever want. Listen to Pod Meets World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, Simple Minds has been through many personnel changes, and the two continuing members, yourself and Charlie Burchill, when you said you got an inspiration to write songs, was that something individually? Did you call up Charlie? Did Charlie get a hold of you first? What actually happened?
Well, I've known Charlie since we were 8 years old. We're both from Glasgow. We're both from south side of Glasgow. At the age of 8, we moved into this new housing scheme. Well, you call them housing projects, but it's a housing scheme. A high-rise apartment, which they just started building in the major cities in the UK, and particularly Glasgow. I mean, those buildings quite soon got a bad rap, but we loved them. Anyway, the first day literally moving in, my mother said, you know, she did, at that time only one brother. She said, get out and play. Go out and discover the neighborhood. Now, they were still building this housing project. Cement, sand, bricks. And we went down the street and there was these kids playing on this huge sandcastle. And the kid sitting at the top, I later discovered his name was Charlie Burchill. And we said, you know, can we play? Yeah, you can play. Let's play. So that was the first time I met Charlie. But the real key moment with Charlie was, and I remember this clearer than he does apparently, was about 3 years after that, at the age of 11. You remember this because I think it was an idea that came from the States. Do you remember, with cigarette packs, you got coupons?
Yeah.
And if you saved them up, there was a gift catalog. Well, Charlie's mom saved up a ton of embassy coupons, and she got Charlie a 6-string Spanish guitar. And I still say to this day, if Mrs. Burchill hadn't done that, you know, I'd be driving a taxi. But I remember Charlie getting the guitar because he was the first kid I knew that had a guitar. And it was a summer's night. He was in the street with it. Everyone was looking around. And it seemed like within a few months, he could play T-Rex songs. He could play Bowie songs. He could, and, you know, to me, it was magical. And that's really how we started to hang out. I mean, we were in the same class at school. There was a few of us. Everyone was starting to get into music, but there was a few of us who were really into it. At that time, the same time, age of 12, I got my first job. Disgusting, really, but my mother got me a job cleaning the back store of a butcher's shop amongst all the blood and crap. But here's the thing. The first week, I got paid £5. Well, £5 then, to give you some perspective, I bought my first concert ticket. It was 60 pence. And it was for the matinee of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust tour. Now, 60 pence, I had £5. I was Frank Sinatra. I could take you. An album cost $1.20. And pretty soon I had this huge album collection that matched Charlie's elder brother's collection. And him and I would swap. And it would be everything from Bowie to Roxy, Lou Reed, all the prog rock stuff. Alice Cooper, The Doors, Jethro Tull, a lot of people you've had on the show, Todd Rundgren, Sparks, on and on. And there was a few other guys in class as well that had that same overwhelming passion. And really Simple Minds grew out of that.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. So what were the circumstances financially for you growing up? What did your parents do for a living? How many kids in the family?
Well, my dad he worked in construction. My dad, all my uncles, some of them were tradesmen, some of them laborers. So it was building sites, cement. And sometimes a Saturday, if he was building a garage for someone, or we would go and help and we'd get some extra pocket money. But we grew up with those kind of physical guys. And Mum, on the other hand, she was from a family of 9. The interesting thing was us being in Glasgow, we're obviously Scots, but Glasgow had such a strong Irish community. Grandparents on both sides were Irish, so it was almost brought up with an Irish culture inside of Scotland. So we weren't quite sure who we were. We knew that London seemed a long place away. We weren't Irish because it was real Irish people, but we were definitely brought up with this culture. Mum, she was a machinist. She was she worked in the factories, heavy garmentry, police uniforms, army uniforms, hard-working girls. And I was thinking today, because, I knew we were going to speak, and my earliest music memory was Mum would get paid once a month and my aunt would take us up to meet her at lunchtime. And 2 things great about that was we'd go to this cafe where we had Knickerbocker Glories, which were just, wow, ice cream and fruits. And then she would go to the record shop and she would buy a single, usually the Beatles, sometimes the Rolling Stones. And we'd go home and she'd put it on, she'd dance. And that was the first music I was conscious of. On Dad's side, he was also a big music fan. He liked people like Fats Domino's. He liked a lot of the country stuff. We called it country and western then. Patsy Cline, Jim Reeves, all of that stuff's really big in Scotland. Johnny Cash, and a lot of Irish rebel songs. So that was the kind of music that was the background. People would work hard. They would enjoy themselves on a Friday and Saturday night, singing and dancing. Glasgow is still like that. Glaswegians spend their money. Edinburgh's old money. They hold on to it. That's the cliche. But Glasgow, the time I grew up, it had more dance halls than anywhere else in Britain. People just loved to have a ball. It was Glasgow, to your American audience, if you could imagine, probably Detroit or New Jersey type of environment.
Okay, so how many kids in the family?
Well, there's 2 brothers. I was the eldest. I am the eldest. But the interesting thing was, you'll find this interesting because you mentioned the band, but at the age of 5, kid upstairs from us, because we lived in a tenement then, kid upstairs, his parents split up. And it was kind of odd. It was very odd at that time. It was unheard of, but it was his mother who had left, and he was left with his dad. And his dad, I remember his dad coming down. I remember clearly there was a bit of a commotion, and basically my mum said his name was Joe. Joseph is going to be coming for lunch and dinner, and he might be staying with us for a while. And we just thought, great, another friend. Joe was already my friend. Well, Joe stayed with us for about the next 13, 14 years. And Joe also was in a band called The Silencers, who you mentioned just recently. Another music fan, another one who wasn't prepared just to listen to records, wanted to actually get round to making them. So essentially it was like 4 boys, eventually 4 boys in the one family.
What kind of kid were you? Were you popular? Did you do well in school? How did it end with school?
I think going back, the first thing that really marked me out young, I had a very quite pronounced speech impediment, a stutter, a stammer. There was no one else at school had that. And I wasn't bullied or anything like that, so I'm not going to go down that road. But, people got used to that. But whenever I went outside of, you could say, my safety net of people who knew me, I would be quiet. I was very quiet. And I think I realized this later on. Being quiet forced me to have this, I think I also had a great inner dialogue. And it also made me listen much more to people, because if you're not talking, you're listening, or you should be, or you're noticing. And only recently I thought, God, that helped me a lot, in terms of being a writer or At the time, it didn't seem to be an advantage. But anyway, it was so pronounced that, they wanted to send me to a different school. And my mother was having none of that. But other than that, I was popular. I was popular at school. I was pretty bright as well. I mean, when I tried, I would get casual. One year, the pressure would be on to do well, and I would do well. And then I'd get casual the next year, and the results would go down. So I enjoyed school. The teachers were great. As I said to you earlier, even on a school trip to Italy, at the age of 13, the teachers would take us there and show us the world, or begin what became a hunger to see the world. So I was, I really enjoyed school. I enjoyed the camaraderie. But the big thing was going back to Dad. Dad was a construction worker, as I said. It was all about the pubs after work. But the one thing so different from Dad and all his mates was he was a reader, a real reader, educated himself. And I remember him taking me to the first library when I was 6 and getting me signed up, and him telling me, you don't know what you've got in your hand. Well, the first thing he told me, he was so proud because the local library was funded by Carnegie, who everyone in America, of course, is aware of Carnegie and what he did there. But he was a Scotsman from Dunfermline. He told me, this man has done this. He's built these libraries. What you have in here, this is a golden ticket. Kids around the world would die to have this. And I remember him, and boy, was he right. I mean, he was bang on there. So that's a kind of background.
Okay, I'm 6 years older than you, so what do I remember? I remember we had transistor radios, we were listening to sports, we were kind of aware of the, the popular music. Then we all wanted to be athletes. The Beatles came along, everything changed. Everybody bought a guitar, everybody wanted to be in a band. So, when you grew up, you talk about meeting Charlie, etc., did you think you were going to be a musician, or did you think you were going to be somebody else? And when did you say, this is it, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, no, I mean, you being 6 years older, you remember the Beatles, appear on TV for the first time. For me, the Beatles were more my mum's thing, even though, because, they were just, your mum and dad danced to them. And so it wasn't until, for me, it was seeing Mark Bolan, where that was the first thing where I thought, this is mine. Mark Bolan appeared on Top of the Pops, and, it was like the coming of Jesus. Well, we thought it was Jesus, but it was probably more John the Baptist. Jesus was still to come. That was Ziggy Stardust. But seeing Bolan, that's when we started buying our own records, not our mother and dad's records, or not our big brother's records. This was our thing. And that was something, but it really began with the live thing, because having the money to go to concerts. Now, I told you about, the Bowie ticket. The other great memory was seeing, when you turned up, and for some reason tours would start in Glasgow. I think the agents would say, send them up there, whoever it is. The Glasgow audience is a great one to get a start with. Well, I remember it would go like this. Let's say it was Genesis with Selling England by the Pound. They would be on the whistle test, the All Grey Whistle Test, which was our rock program on a Tuesday night. The Wednesday, I think NME would come up on the train from London. So we had the New Musical Express talking about the tour coming. Thursday would be Sounds, the next magazine. Friday would be Melody Maker, all this build up. And tours would begin on a Friday night. And usually I would be there in those years, but I like telling people this story. This is where I really lucked out. There was a kid in my class who said to me, you're into all this music, all this weird stuff, gigs and all that. He said, I can get you into any gig you want to go to, which is quite a statement. And I said, how come? He said, my brother's the head of security it was the Glasgow Greens then. I can get into any gig. I said, you're kidding. Yeah, let's go. And indeed, we went, and his brother would open the door, and we got to see the Stones come through, Bob Marley came through, you name it, Zeppelin, The Who. And then eventually his brother took quite a shining to me. He said, you're really into this. I tell you what, sometimes we need a few kids to run out and get beer and cigarettes and all this for the bands and, like a runner. Come up and you can do. So we then got to see sound checks and we got to watch from the side. We were just kids. And there's a lot of stories that came from that. But the one I like telling the best is that the band that I loved at that moment, I really loved them, was a band called Mott the Hoople. I know I think you've spoken to Ian, and they were my band. And he said, well, Thursday night, Mott the Hoople, come up after school. I didn't even go to school. I ran up. I remember getting the bus into town. And the head of the road crew said, no, Mott the Hoople aren't going to sound check. They're doing Top of the Pops. They're not doing a sound check. Go over there and help the support band, help the drummer. And I said, who's the support band? And he shrugged and went, I don't know, a band called Queen. And so I remember clearly being on the stage, and this was before Queen had come through with Seven Seas of Rye. Freddie was already in the suit, the black and white suit. I already knew on hearing the guitar, what is this? And so I stood by that night and watched Queen blow Mott the Hoople off the stage like there was no stage. And that's just one anecdote. But in some ways it was like, this is getting to your question. In some ways, like, it was amazing education. Did I look at Freddie Mercury or David Bowie and think I could do that? Not at all. Did I look at that world and think, I've got to get involved with that world somehow? Yes, I did. I would have been happy to have been a roadie. I would have been happy to have been a tour manager. I would have been happy to have been a manager. And it didn't dawn on me. Someone with a stutter, a stammer, who was afraid to stand up and read in class. Why would you throw yourself into the front line and make an absolute laughingstock of yourself? No, that wasn't on the agenda.
Okay, I've never been to Scotland, actually. Is Scotland, wouldn't be identical to Canada, the United States, but some countries, even though they abut each other, it's like having a glass wall and you look at the other side. Was Scotland fluid with London and UK saying, oh yeah, I can go to Manchester, wherever? Was that like a big leap?
Well, again, it's funny enough, it was a big leap. London was a hell of a leap, and of course, not so much in Scotland, but you became aware as you get older of a class system. Now, I already explained to you that this is a phenomenal figure. We were from manual workers. The percentage of people in Glasgow who went to university that came from parents who were manual workers is something like 0.3%. So there was this feeling of, we just don't do that stuff. That's their class system. That's a way all above us. We're going to have to find some other hustle. And so there was, and then people with those plummy accents and Eton and Oxford and Cambridge and all of that stuff. That could have been Mars. However, there was a kinship with people in Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, who were all in the same kind of industries. There was a kinship there. But the biggest thing, transformative events in my life, one of the greatest things, people don't do it anymore. We discovered at the age of 14 this thing called hitchhiking, where if you went down to the motorway and stuck out your thumb, you could go on some kind of adventure. And indeed, both Charlie and I started to do that quite a lot. Initially, it was hitchhiking to, there must have been a year when the local venues in Glasgow were getting refurbished or something. So the bands we wanted to see weren't coming north. They were stopping at Newcastle. Let's hitchhike down to Newcastle and see Iggy Pop. And we would hitchhike down. I mean, it's less than 200 miles, but, and of course, when you got there, sometimes you didn't even see the gig, but you met someone, became friends, a whole other adventure. It was almost like, for a lot of people, the world ends at the bottom of your street. But for us, the world began at the bottom of our streets. And I remember getting, this is quite cute, a letter from a friend who had moved to London. And he said, there's this thing called punk rock, the Sex Pistols, and it plays every week. You got to get down and see this. Hitchhike down. You can stay with me. Now, what year would that have been? We already sort of tuning into the Ramones, Patti Smith's first album. We knew about this punk thing, but up until then it was a New York thing. New York Dolls, of course, prior. But this English punk thing, the Stranglers we heard, John Peel was starting to play the Stranglers. And we could really feel somehow the gates were opening, something else. So Charlie and I hitchhiked down all the way to London, and we started to see these bands, the Marquee and Hope and Anchor, Elvis Costello playing, and NME was starting to write about this stuff. And I remember after going, I think I went to see Elvis Costello it was a tiny pub, and it was electrifying. You know, he was just so wired. The band was so wired. And then on the way back, it was the first ever festival I went. Bob Dylan was playing in Blackbush, Eric Clapton. And with the greatest of respect, I couldn't relate to it anymore. After seeing Elvis Costello pumped up and playing those, that's what it is. After seeing the Stranglers, that's what it is. It really, and of course, before we knew it, this, let's call it the punk revolution, had caught like wildfire through the UK. And for the first time, it really was the lunatics had taken over the asylum in a way that could never imagine before. Before we knew it, kids like us were starting bands. Kids like us were starting fashion labels. Kids like us were making documentaries, starting fanzines. Suddenly it felt like the shackles were off. It didn't matter what school you went to. It didn't matter if you had a rich daddy. It didn't matter if you had a manager in London. And the liberation of all that certainly set me on course, and a lot of artists from my generation set us on course to, still to where we are today.
Okay. It's unbelievably hard to make it. Talented is at most 50%. So, needless to say, you and Charlie made it. Who was the driving force? Was it you? Was it Charlie? Was it a third party? Did you ever waver or say, okay, we've seen the future, we're going to go, we're going to get there?
I mean, you could say it's all about music. And certainly Charlie plays the music, but I've got to give great credit also to the guys in the band. Michael McNeil on keyboards. Derek Forbes was really a guitar player who played bass lines as though it was a guitar. Everyone was chipping in. But as you know, there needs to be a vision overriding. There needs to be a vision. What kind of band are we going to be? What's the ethics going to be? What's the ideals going to be? What's the looks going to be? Who's the producer we're going to work with? Who's the artwork? It was me. And it still is me. And Charlie's absolutely cool with that. I mean, on top of the fact that I write lyrics and melodies. But it goes back to this thing, and I just didn't want anything else in my life. I mean, in those young years, I have to say now, I really regret it. I was horrible with the girlfriends and the wives and all. When anything that caused work to stop, I was antisocial because I was just so into it. And I'm still so into it. But I kind of, well, if the people who knew me around, and they say that whenever I turned up with my demo cassette, listen to this is what we're going to do. There was always some kind of plan there. There was always some kind of vision there. I don't know how I was able to do that. I don't know, because there was no rock school. There was no, you couldn't go along to the guy along the road whose uncle was in a band and could show you how to do it. There was nothing. So it was all on, and sheer instinct. But it's an amazing thing. On Sunday there, we played a gig in France, and this time there was a lot of 80s bands playing there, and names you'll know: Madness, The Undertones, OMD. And the amazing thing was, talking to those guys, they all went to school together. Now, I'm not sure what other industries where, I guess it doesn't happen now. Bands rarely even happen now. But they all went to school together. Now, I'm not even sure what other industries that ever happened. I mean, of course, we know about Bill Gates and, how Microsoft began, or rather Apple and those guys, but it is amazing. I mean, of course, that goes back to the early Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Who and all of those bands. It was really, it was a school thing, and everyone has their part to play, and it fits together to a point where it stops fitting together.
Okay. When bands get together and they start to rehearse, and it's probably you, there's always someone say, okay, we got to get gigs. We got to get an agent. We got to get a manager. Yeah. How did that all come together?
Well, I remember, people talk about, in the early days, there was always that thing of, selling out and, you're treating this like it's a business. I'd be like, what are you talking about? It is a business. For example, business lesson 1, our first ever gig, playing in a pub in Glasgow, and we couldn't believe we were even getting the gig. But the owner gave us the gig, a Monday night that would be otherwise empty. We filled it with our friends and went down a storm. And, we looked around. We get paid £15. Basically, it went something like, it cost about £5 to rent the van, £5 to rent the PA, £5 to get a couple of guys to help us, a driver or whatever. Basically, it cost us 20 quid to put the gig on, and we got paid 15. So we were bankrupt on the first night. That was us. Now, as soon as the gig finished, I just thought, how are we going to get to the next gig? We're five quid down. How's this going to ever work? So I remember going upstairs, and I got sent upstairs. He was upstairs the office to challenge him. It's pretty funny. He was a little Greek guy. And I said, listen, he said, you band's great. Come back. You can play every Monday. I said, no, this won't work. We're bankrupt. What are you talking about? I explained. I said, you have to pay us more money. No, I'm not paying you more. I said, you have to pay us more. We'll fill this place. It would have been empty. I've been here on a Monday night. It's empty. You have to pay us more. We can't make it work. Finally, he said, all right. It was a steakhouse. The cellar was the music upstairs. They were eating steak and stuff. He said, I'll do you a deal. I'll give you £25 if you turn down. And I said, we can't turn down. We can't turn down. People have to feel it. We can't turn down. It's too loud. I said, what makes you say it's too loud? You're up here. He said, the peas are bouncing off the plate. He said, people are complaining up here. The plates are rattling. Well, we played there for the next 6 months. And every time I'd go back and hit him up for more. Because we were then wanting to spread out, go and play in Aberdeen, go and play in Dundee, go and play in Stirling. And it became a real lesson. It became a real lesson. It was already a company. And that's a dirty secret.
Okay. The dream of a band is to get a record deal. So you had a manager who was associated with Arista. You get a record deal. How did that all come together?
Well, that was an amazing thing. Our parents, they were great. Our parents chipped in to give us £100 to go into a studio in Glasgow to make a demo tape. And about 5 or 6 songs. And I had a friend in the local record shop who said, I can get you the name of all the A&R guys. We didn't know what A&R guys were. We kind of knew, but he said, no, you just take it down. You give him your tape. He'll give it a listen. You know, we were so green. But at least he worked in the record store. He was the cool guy. He gave us a name, you know, Island Records and whoever the CBS. So I hitchhiked down with my friend David Henderson. We go around can we see the A&R guy? No, are you crazy? Do you have an appointment? No, what are you crazy? So usually it would be girls at the front desk, you know, and we would say, oh, that's a drag, you know, and maybe you'd like a cassette. And Bob, it took me 2 weeks to hitchhike home, but believe it or not, by the time I hitchhiked home, a couple of people had called that the girls had been playing the music in the reception. Usually, you know, the interns and the receptionists and stuff, the A&R guys walking through on the way to lunch. What's that song called? Who's this? That's these Glasgow guys. Anyway, by the time we had no manager, obviously. By the time I'd hitchhiked home, my mum said, oh, a couple of guys have called for you. And I said, well, who was it? Oh, I don't know. I didn't have a pen at the time. I was making your dad's dinner. And I would say, well, was it CBS? No, I don't think that was it. Was it EMI? No, that sounds familiar. I said, Christ, you know. She said, if they like you, they'll call back. Well, they did. And don't ask me where we got the chutzpah for this, but 2 or 3 called back and they said, listen, we want to bring you down, play a gig in London, do a showcase. We'll let the rest of the people in the company see. Now, to hear those words was so, you know, people would have died. The local bands where we were from would have died to hear the words. To every one of them, I said, no, you got to come up here. What? At that time, people didn't travel to the provinces. You had to go to London. That's why a lot of Scottish bands failed. They would go to London, soon they would be broke, and then they would fall out. They'd be living in a squat. I knew all that. I said, no, you got to come up here. No, we're not going to. I said, well, you know, we play up here. I knew we played every Sunday night in a place called the Mars Bar. And by that time, not only were we getting good, people would come and see us. They knew every word. So when the A&R guys eventually made their way up, and they did, it was like every song was a hit because the audiences knew all the choruses and we had worked it out really so well. You know, we had our own little light show. I mean, I'm talking about a tiny pub, but in our mind, it was Madison Square Garden. And we already knew, and you'll get a laugh at this, the irony, we already knew the label we wanted. We wanted to be on Arista. Why? Lou Reed, Patti Smith, Iggy Pop, and there was an American A&R guy there. You maybe know him, a guy called Ben Edmonds, who really liked us. So we eventually signed, and we thought, God, we're on the coolest label out. I remember going down to the plush offices on Marble Arch, thinking, home of Lou Reed, Patti Smith, Iggy Pop. They only have one huge portrait on the wall when we walked in. Barry Manilow. And I thought, what is this? And then I realized it's Barry that's paying for all of this. Because none of the other 3 were, let's be honest. But yeah, it was a dream to get a record deal. It was a dream for someone who'd hung out in record stores all my life, the first day when you see your single in the window of the store. And I can't tell you the thrill of that. It's something that'll never leave me.
Okay, now all those early albums didn't come out in America. The first thing we saw was New Gold Dream, which was on A&M, Virgin through A&M. It was hard to follow what went on before, even though all the press said something on. So what was going on when you were on Arista?
Well, unfortunately, not a lot in terms of sales. I mean, what happened was there was always a couple of sides to Simple Minds. I mean, we really started out wanting to be an art rock band, for lack of a better term. And indeed, we still do, to be honest with you. But we couldn't help ourselves in the sense that there was always a few pop tunes in there that would make us different from Magazine, that would make us different from Wire, that would make us different from the early Ultravox. But there was always this, what is it going to be? And our first album came out, and based on the live work, I mean, even before we'd played in England, our album was out and in the charts, just in Scottish sales alone. But that was the live thing. The record came, now radio weren't up for it. We didn't like it either, the debut album. I remember thinking, I mean, it was a great experience. We worked with legendary producer John Leckie. And I remember when you think about this, well, but John it was a wisdom. We recorded in this residential place with the Rolling Stones mobile truck, and John thought, we'll do that. That was a thrill to be inside the Rolling Stones mobile truck, but we'll save the budget and I'll take you to Abbey Road for 10 days. Now, I guess he was thinking what an education that will be. And it certainly was, because as soon as we went into Abbey Road, I completely froze. The magnitude of I thought, you're walking past where the Beatles plugged in here and where Pink Floyd did. I thought, who the hell needs us? We should have stayed in Glasgow and stayed in a little studio and worked on a much raw sound. I mean, not all the guys thought that. Some of the other guys thought, this is great. But it was like being a rookie and, you're already playing the World Series or something. You haven't even, up until then, we'd only been in a studio in Glasgow for 1 hour. I mean, it was like, what is this? So when as we were making the record, thanks to the engineers and the production, I realized now it sounded good. What it sounded professional, but it was hollow. It didn't have the vibe. And I seem to be the only one with the problem, but it just didn't make me feel as the demos were feeling. So it was the first case of demo-itis. We should have just worked on the demos. So we didn't like the first record. But we always kept this thing of playing live. And even though we weren't getting radio play, we would go round and round. And at first it'd be 2 men and a dog. And then you'd go back a month later and it'd be 10 men and a dog. And then promoters were starting to say, listen, I haven't seen that reaction that you got tonight. So we always kept the live thing going, even though the first 2 or 3 records. But by the third record, of course, now this is insane. You wouldn't even get the chance to make one record now. By the third record, we were in a heck of a lot of debt. And looked like we were going to get dropped, and who knows what was going to be. But just at that moment, this new romantic thing came along, where anyone that had a synthesizer and a bit of a disco beat, in our guys were up for. Duran Duran were coming out, Spandau Ballet were coming out, the dance charts and Billboard. And we had a couple of songs that started to feature in that. And I have to say, by that time, our favourite record label had become Virgin. They had so much great stuff from Sex Pistols, XTC, so on and so forth. Virgin started to kind of put out the feelers. Well, if you get dropped, we're here. And we didn't get dropped, to be honest. We had to buy ourselves out. That was a bit painful, but Virgin picked us up, and they were the greatest label to be with. And then through them, eventually A&M, which was another great label to be with. But the thing with Simple Minds in Europe, UK, and the States, it was always out of kilter. Because, as you said, those first 3 records weren't released in America.
So who bought you out of Eros, yourselves or Virgin?
Virgin bought us out. They bought us out I think, for 35 grand. And the first record we did with them cleared the debts. And from then on, then the next 4 or 5 were number one albums.
Okay, so as I say, from an American perspective, New Gold Dream comes out on gold vinyl. It really got a push. What was the perspective from your end?
It was exciting. I mean, it's still, it got a push. College radio, great friends of ours, and especially the younger kids at A&M, Karen Glauber, Jeff Gold was a kid then, Wayne Isaacs, people like that on our side, starting to push. But even with that, Bob, it didn't make a dent like it did everywhere else. I mean, Merck in Canada made sure we got play there and started to feel like we were getting places, selling out the Massey Hall and Australia. We were having hits. It seemed everywhere else. Let's just say we were at the door. We were at the door of going into the bigger league. Of course, there was this thing just about to come over the horizon called MTV, but no one knew about that then.
Tickets for our 2022 iHeartRadio Music Festival are on sale now at AXS.com. See Halsey, Megan Thee Stallion, Nicki Minaj, Sam Smith, Black Eyed Peas, Diplo, and so many more, all on one stage.
Iconic names from all genres of music.
Avril Lavigne,
Lionel Richie, LL Cool J, Luke Combs, Marcus Mumford,
Maren Morris,
Morgan Wallen,
Pat Benatar,
The Black Keys.
A weekend full of superstar performances, never seen before collaborations, and once-in-a-lifetime moments you'll have to see to believe.
Friday, September 23rd and Saturday the 24th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas.
iHeartRadio, let's go!
Our 2022 iHeartRadio Music Festival.
Buy your tickets now at AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
The Pod Meets World podcast takes you back in time to 1993 for the ultimate Boy Meets World rewatch. Join original cast members Danielle Fishel, Will Friedle, and Ryder Strong as they relive every episode, sharing memories, behind-the-scenes info, and more.
None of us have seen an episode since it aired back in the 90s, so we'll be witnessing our middle part haircuts, hooded t-shirts, and teenage overacting for basically the first time right along with you.
You'll get a fresh perspective on all your favorite moments from the crew at John Adams High.
From the neighborly advice of Mr. Feeney,
Two plays with squirrels.
To cutting my hair on TV for the very first time.
to that time I joined a cult.
We'll break down the good, the bad, and the nostalgic ugly.
Do it all over again with Topanga, Eric, and Sean. Your first crush, your first kiss, those world-shaking moments, and all those life lessons. It's everything a Boy Meets World fan could ever want. Listen to Pod Meets World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, how do you end up working with Steve Lillywhite? What's that experience like, and how do you end up with Waterfront?
Oh, Steve, at that time there really was not very many, youngish rock producers. And Steve, he had made a bit of a name for himself, especially with Peter Gabriel's album, that third album, which blew all our minds. But then, of course, the U2 records, Big Country. There was a point where it just seemed Steve was the only guy. Everyone else was using drum machines. There was a point where it just seemed like Steve was the only guy that could make a rock record in the UK. That's not quite true, but that's how it seemed. Everything from XTC, U2, so it was always imminent. And then we ended up playing a few festivals, but this time when I said we're going through the big league, same live, we started to get asked to be on some of the bigger festivals in Germany, Holland, Belgium. And then you would really get to meet some of your contemporaries, and people would hang out. One of the festivals, it was a 2-day festival where we finally caught up with U2, and Steve was there with them. The first day, I got to get this right. They went on before us, and the second day we went on before them, and that was a heck of an experience. They had just come back from the States with a gold album with War, and to say they were mind-blowing was, I mean, I couldn't work out where the noise were coming from. It only looked like, when you see now the huge show, back then it looked like there was just a Vox amp. And they were mind-blowingly good. So good, in fact, I remember someone said to me recently, did you think then they would become the biggest band in the world? I said, well, I knew they would become the biggest band in the world. She said, how did you know? And I said, because Bono told me they would. With that level of self-assuredness and confidence. But anyway, Steve was there. He's a charming guy, had made great records. And we were wanting to beef our sound up. We had brought in a much heavier drummer, and it all seemed to be right.
So what was the experience like, and how, my favorite song from that album is Waterfront. How did that come together?
Well, that's a song that was written really, I mean, it's even hard to call. It's not a song in a traditional sense, but lyrically, it's about the rebirth of our city. Our city, Glasgow, as many cities, originally began as a fishing village, and it goes through, it grows, the industrial age comes, the city grows, it gets rich, the river dies, all that pollution. And then the industrial age ends, there's rust everywhere, there's no more work. Guess what? The salmon's back. Now, I'm not saying the whole city could live in salmon, Bob, but there was something in this about renewal, rebirth. Take me to the river. When I got the music, usually the way it works is I get the music, and 9 times out of 10, I'm blown away with it. And I can just hear an atmosphere in it. I see a picture in it, and usually it's in sync with some words I've been thinking about or something. And the first time we played that song was at a festival, and we hadn't even finished writing the song, but sonically it was so strong. We thought we could just start with this as a kind of riff and see where the audience goes with it. And, well, they went mental. So we knew we were onto something. And Steve brought a great focus to it. But it was the bass player's melody, Derek Forbes. I've got to say that now, or else he'll be on the phone to me tomorrow.
Okay, so I have you right here. There's a lot been written about. Tell me the story of Keith Forsey, Don't You Forget About Me, how it happened. Did you like it at the time? Did you not want to do it? Word was that you resented that was a hit. What was going on, and what are your feelings about it today?
Well, everything you said there is true. There was. I can tell you our story. Of course, I'll tell you our story. I now keep hearing everyone else's story, and I don't think that's true. I keep hearing that it was offered to this person and offered to that person and offered to this person. It may well have been, but I maintain if it was offered to them, it was offered while we were refusing and dilly-dallying. And you might say the whole approach was wrong. We were young, we were bratish. We thought, why the heck would we do someone else's song? Especially when we'd just written this thing called Alive and Kicking, which it wasn't out yet or recorded, but we thought it was the bee's knees. And we thought, why would we do someone else's song? What's this about? Well, it turns out that Keith had come to see us play, had come backstage. There was a load of people backstage. I didn't get to meet him, but he had given the cassette of the song and said, the record company's going to be in touch with you soon. He'd given it to the keyboard player, who put it in his pocket and didn't listen to it for weeks. So it was going nowhere. And we started getting these calls. Basically, A&M were kind of saying we should have pushed harder with New Gold Dream. They saw the success it had everywhere else. We should have pushed harder. Your next record, and you remember the great Charlie Minor, he was on the phone. You got to do this. You got to do this. This will set up your next record great. For those who don't know, he was one of the greatest promotion guys ever. when Charlie got on the phone, it was like, oh, this is serious. He said, this movie is going to be great. A&M, this'll set you up so good. You'll love it and you'll love the song. And I said, what song? And he said, I thought we were writing the song. No, the song's there. They've got the song for the movie. It works with the script. And no, that doesn't sound good. We write our own songs. The idea of doing someone else's song was alien to us. Anyway, we listened to the song and we don't think it's a bad song. And I got to say to you the other day, talking about how the way songs turn up on the internet now, the original demos, I love listening to the Jerry Rafferty song and how that dispute was. What a great thing to hear that. I played that track actually about 20 times, the demo. Anyway, we listened to it and Keith was singing this song, Don't You Forget About Me, which to me sounded much more like the Psychedelic Furs, who incidentally is a band we all liked. It didn't sound like a Simple Minds song. It didn't sound like a lyric I would write. We just couldn't see, why. And we really dragged our feet. No, not sure about this. Not sure. And the way I remember it is that Keith eventually turned up. And the story was, you see, I know we'll come to him, I already had it in my mind I wanted to work with Jimmy Iovine. I thought we needed someone really to push us into writing better songs. But Keith turned up and I know you're not going to do the song, but maybe we'll work in future and all that. Well, lo and behold, we loved Keith. Didn't so much love his song, but loved him. And you hung out a couple of days and why not just try? He was very shrewd. He kind of cajoled us. Let's go in for a couple of hours. If it works, who knows? If it doesn't work, you get the record company off your back. It was shrewd. Well, we went in and it literally was about 2 hours. And we mocked up the start to their song with the hey, hey, heys. And then this whole breakdown thing, there was no words for that. So I started to sing the corniest thing that came in my mind, la, 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 la. And before we knew it, it was there. And I kept saying, no, I got to go back. I can't leave that coda like that. I have to sing meaningful words. But they weren't having none of it. And isn't it strange? It's the way life throws up these things that you try your very hardest at something. It doesn't work. And then something you couldn't care about. You just do it. And it becomes, kind of a song of its generation. And some might even say subsequent generations.
So how do you feel about it now?
Well, the first thing I feel is this is where it's churlish to have any problems with it. What I feel about it now is when we went in that day, we put our heart and soul in it. That was the thing. And we put our heart and soul in it every night we play it, because that song has given the world over so much pleasure to people. Do we play it at sound checks? No. Do we play it at rehearsals? No. Are we grateful for everything it brought to us? 99% yes. But I also think we had a problem it's a stupid problem. We felt, God, we got all that success with that thing and we didn't deserve it. I think there's a feeling of we didn't deserve it. Only therapists could work that out, Bob, but none of us go to therapy.
Okay, so how do you end up working with Jimmy Iovine?
He just seemed, again, as a fan of music, there's so many great records, his name seemed to be there. I mean, the obviously Born to Run, and then Patti Smith's, Tom Petty, Dire Straits. I mean, that's not bad right there. Iovan's name kept popping up. The one thing I felt after working with Steve, which was the record prior to working with Jimmy and Bob Clearmountain, we can't leave Bob out in this. I felt Steve, the record we did with Steve was a game of two halves. The first half, I think, has got great tracks, but the second half not so. I mean, one of the reasons was we were constantly touring and we would take 6 weeks to do a record and we would be bluffing it. But you can only bluff it so far. And I thought, we need someone to really put us under pressure with the songs. And someone must have told me that was Jimmy's thing, that he really beat you up before you got anywhere near a studio. And I was up for that kind of, challenge. But unfortunately, we couldn't get Jimmy to bite for the longest time. And he tells a story of, he'd gone down to Australia. I think you remember, well, I know you know, he's brilliant, Colin Hay, Men at Work, who, you know, also had this kind of freakish success in the States. And I think they weren't playing ball with the American record company, as I heard it. And they wanted to send someone down. And Jimmy got the offer. He went down. When he got to Australia, he found out that those Australians don't take anything from no one. So Jimmy told the story of, he was making his way back to the airport. And he was in the taxi with a kid driver. What do you do? And Jimmy, I'm a record producer. Oh, really? Who do you work with? Well, I work with Springsteen and I work with U2 and blah, blah, blah. Now, we hadn't been able to get Jimmy on the phone. Anyway, the taxi driver kid says to Jimmy, this is my band. And he plays on Waterfront. And Jimmy went, wow, that's that band. And of course, we met up. At the time I remember going down to the studio. He was working with Lone Justice. And we were so keen, you know, and he said, so what do you got to play me? I said, well, I haven't got anything yet. You know, we're just, you haven't got anything. And he said, well, you know, there's that song you've got out, that Don't You Forget About Me song, that's on fire. You better have stuff. And I said, we will have stuff. We'll have stuff. We'll have good stuff. The band's in form just now. Yeah, I've heard all that before. He said, I've heard it all before. I'm not going near you until you have the songs, that you can play me the songs. And I said, okay, I'll be back with songs. He said, when? I said, about 6 weeks. He said, you're going to have 10 great songs in 6 weeks. I said, yeah. He said, are you fucking Bob Dylan? I mean, I've been looking for you. I've been looking for you all my life. And I thought, oh God, I'm in with someone tough here. And that's the way it started. And I have to say, at the time, Jimmy, we didn't know this, because although his name was involved in those records, it seemed to be the jury was out what he actually did. I later found out. People say, well, he's a vibe merchant, or he creates a culture, or whatever. Well, all of that's hugely important. It's Shelley Yakis that does it. It's Bob Clearmountain that does it. But I have to say, even to this day, Iovine, by far, has been the best motivator, coach, all-round good guy I've ever came across. And I'm not saying that just now because we're best friends. I haven't spoke to Jimmy for gazillions of years. But when I look back now, I mean, what a coach Jimmy was. And he knew, the thing he knew was, maybe technically he couldn't articulate it, but he knew when it felt right. And for me, whether it's movies, whether it's music, whether it's books, whether it's people you hang out with, whether it's food you eat, it's all about how it feels. It's all about how it makes you feel. And God, Jimmy was so great.
So you had phenomenal success with that album. Why didn't you work with Jimmy again?
Because I think we were good at, very few people did we work with again. I mean, you get a lot of bands that don't get on with the producers, or they resent the producers, or they see them as something that's forced on them. Quite often that's the case. We loved all the producers we worked with, but I think we got the best out them on one. We got it. Okay, that songwriting thing, I got that now. I'm never going to do that again. That lesson's learned. What else is out there? Well, you know, Trevor Horn comes knocking. That's not bad. I mean, when you think of the records he was making. And so, you know, it was time for a new adventure.
Okay, so that album with Trevor Horn has Belfast Child. Tell us the story there.
Well, Trevor was, I mean, the thing about Trevor is when you think back then, you think of those record-breaking, I mean, everything he did was epic. Whether it was Yes, whether it was Frankie Goes to Hollywood, whether it was ABC, Seal. And he came up at the time we were working in this studio in the countryside. And as soon as he comes in, he goes to us, why have you never made some kind of Celtic sounding record or song? And I said, well, that's the stuff I grew up hating. I didn't want to know about all of that stuff when I grew up. I wanted to know about New York. I wanted to know about Detroit. I wanted to know about Los Angeles. I wanted to know about the Doors. I don't want to know about my grandmother's Highland home and her music and all that stuff. And he said, well, I think you're making a mistake there. So he planted a seed. And we were working one night. We took a break for dinner. And I came out, and the bass player we were working with at the time, a fellow called John Giblin, a bit older than us, John, and he did know folk music, and he did know a lot of the Celtic stuff. As I came into the room, he was there alone, and he'd taken the bass off. He could play a bit of keys, and he was playing the most hauntingly beautiful melody. And I just sat down and listened. And at the end, I said to him, when did you write that? I assumed he'd written it because he'd written a couple of things for us. I just assumed he'd written it. And he said, about 200 years ago. What are you talking about? He said, no, I didn't write this. This is from a traditional Irish air called She Moved Through the Fair. And I said, really? Well, just that week there had been, it was before the peace process in Belfast, there had been a horrendous incident. And it was all over the news. Now, growing up in Glasgow, on a clear day and just down the coast from Glasgow, you can actually see Ireland, literally. So we grew up with all that on our doorstep, all that sadness and tragedy of those years. We felt very, very close to it. And with that album, Street Fighting Years, I guess I was about 30 then. I guess at a certain time, you feel the need. You want to write about the big themes, the big subjects. And at the time, Mandela, apartheid, human rights, on our doorstep, Belfast. And when he came up with that when he presented that Irish melody, he said, go and check out the song. So I went back and I got obsessed by the song. Of course, this is the days before the internet, but I ended up with so many versions, and I thought, I wonder if you can just write your own words to it, because it was obviously public domain. It wasn't a publishing issue. And I thought, I wonder how kosher that is. Because for some people in the folk world, it's a sacred cow. But for other people, that's the very nature of folk music, that they often change the words, and every generation came along and they adapted and they put their own thing. So eventually I thought, fuck it. I'm going to write my own story, or I'm going to write my own song to this melody. Trevor thought that was a great idea. And in a sense, what we put together was, it's almost our version of Stairway to Heaven, because that also begins very folk, and then the song expands, the band, the solo, and then it's a case of, well, we'll do it, but it'll never work. Well, it goes to number one. I don't know how many countries it went to number one. Unfortunately, it wasn't for America. But it was Trevor who pushed us into that. And for the longest time, we didn't play it. We've started playing it again. It seems to have found its time, because even though, thankfully, situation in Northern Ireland has changed dramatically, the real essence of the song is about the victims of violence and war. And right now, as we speak, certainly in Europe, that's very prevalent. So whenever we play the song, yeah, it's about Belfast, but it's no longer about Belfast. It's about wherever war is going on.
Okay, the next album, you work with Trevor's guy, Stephen Lipson. You do Let There Be Love, which is my favorite Simple Minds song. So I'm going to ask you how that came together.
Well, I mean, Stephen was, when we realised working with Trevor that Stephen was such a huge part of it. I mean, Trevor wouldn't deny that. He was a brilliant programmer. He could play as well, Steve. You know, sometimes he would just give me the guitar, you know, and he would play a line, and other people, you'd be like, hang on a minute. But it would be a great idea. So he was also a collaborator. We were under pressure, Bob, because after Belfast Child and that Street Fighting Years record that didn't do anything in America, thankfully did well elsewhere, we were under pressure to try and get back to a more classic Simple Minds song in relation to a sort of Alive and Kicking or something. So if I was being crude, I would say that we threw ourselves into trying to get something in that vein again. And it worked. I mean, again, it's a song when we play it live, very soulful verse, but big soaring chorus. I mean, they say that writers only have one or two themes, whether you're Bob Dylan or whatever. And there's always been a great optimism, Simple Minds music, I think, a great feeling of don't give up, keep the faith. And essentially under a lot of the lyrics to those songs, that's the message.
Okay, you know, I love the next album, 1995, Good News, but if you look back at this period, which ultimately leads to your the denouement and pulling away, would you do anything different?
I mean, what we would have done different was not leave so much time between albums. I mean, you know, if you leave 2 or 3 years between albums, I mean, you're asking for problems. But there was reasons for those gaps as well. I mean, we, as a touring band, if you tour for a year, and when we toured, it would be the best part of a year. Because, you know, that was still how we made our coin. And that's still the life we wanted to live. So if you tour for a year, by the time you come off of that, and by this time we're getting older and you know, you have other things in your life. Kids, wives, obligations, parents are getting older. You got to give time to that. Then you got to write. And then it's, you know, before you know it, 3 years is gone. And a new generation comes along. So, that is it. But I don't know. You can't have it all. Maybe some people can. I don't think so. You can't have it all. Something has to give, and you lose out in one area. You hope your life gets enriched in another area. As space is made. So it's kind of hard to, it's hard. I mean, I also think we were running, you know, we were starting to run on fumes too. I mean, how many songs have you got in you? How much, you know, sometimes you just have to head for the hills and give people a break. People have had enough of you. Time to move on and see. I think the trick then is, it's getting back to stuff we're talking about. You got to head for the hills and try not do anything too desperate, you know, because it's, be patient. Get other things in your life. Stock up the pool again. Because what are you going to write from? You have to fill up the well. You have to get hungry again. Your question was, what would we do different? What I would say is I'm glad of something that we didn't do. We didn't get embittered. Because, you know, sometimes you meet people that kind of had it and they lost it, and it's everyone else's fault. You know, the world owes them something. Or, oh, the record company didn't do this. Oh, the media wrote that. Oh, this. Sometimes you just got to take it on the chin. You know, what are you going to run home to your mommy? It is what it is.
So you ultimately did get married and have kids. How did you keep that marriage going for so long as a road musician, and what are your kids up to today?
Well, I don't know if it was. I mean, of course, it's subjective of what is long, but, you know, one of the big stories in my life, it will always be, was meeting Chrissy Hind and marrying Chrissy Hind. I mean, Chrissy's older than me. She's your age, Bob, I think, maybe a couple of years older. She's 8 years older than me. Meeting someone everyone has this image of Chrissy, and I have to say, she does live up to it most of the time. But there's a whole other side of her where she's a pussycat. And when I met her, I was 24. She was 32. I don't think I'd ever even lived with a girlfriend before that, or a woman. But my band was selling. We were having hits. Maybe there was a piece of me thinking, this is a piece of cake. I need a real challenge. Well, believe me, I got one. And, but looking back now, amazing. Girl from Ohio. I was such a fan as well. What an artist she is. But she'd been around the block. And kind of no one I hung out with had been around the block more than me. I didn't have any older brothers or sisters. She was at Kent State. She had all that. She's from Ohio. She knew all the Midwest. She had an amazing taste in music through listening to the radio. She knew country. She knew blues. She knew rock. She's the only person I would, to this day, who would say, Bruce Springsteen, give me a break. It's Mitch Ryder you want to see. There was such an education there. Really great woman. But you find out that the thing that excites you the most, quite often is not the thing that's good for you. That can be heroin, or it can be junk food, or it can be relationships, or whatever. It wasn't meant to last long, to be honest. You see, hey, it makes sense. Marry someone in the same industry. They'll understand, If you work in a cake shop, marry whatever, the other person, you'll understand. You're from the same line, but it's very hard to make it work together. I didn't even know who I was then. I was still a kid. But we have not only a kid, we have grandkids. And still in touch, and still good dialogue, and I'm still a fan.
And how about Patsy Kensit after that?
Well, Patsy, I was the elder one. And I think at the time, I was smitten. My kids loved her, still do. I think I helped her out of a jam. Sometimes you love somebody because you think you can do something for them that makes you also feel good, and that was the case there. I was still a fairly young man, and I think a part of me felt good. But you're right. Then you go on tour, and then you're not there for this, and you're not there for that, and then resentments begin, and I have to say, I can be very selfish. I really can. I'm very selfish with my time. I'm very selfish with my headspace. And I spend a lot of time alone. I love my band, and I love being out on the road. I love playing. Maybe it just wasn't for me.
Okay, but you're in a long-term relationship now, right?
Yeah, for the longest time, been with a Japanese woman. And when I said earlier about finding someone who's good for you, who can organize everything, as well as make you feel good, and everyone loves. And also, the other thing is, it's so great to be with people from other cultures. Other people would tell you that's not the case. You should be with your own only. But it's been so enriching, not only to live in places, but I'm still Glasgow through and through. The rock I'm made from is Glasgow through and through. But it's been shaped by our experiences, by the people we've been with, different cultures, to get a language, to go to Japan, to spend time there. It's been so rewarding.
Tickets for our 2022 iHeartRadio Music Festival are on sale now at AXS.com. See Halsey, Megan Thee Stallion,
sweetest.
Nicki Minaj. Sam Smith. Black Eyed Peas. Diplo. And so many more, all on one stage.
Iconic names from all genres of music.
Avril Lavigne.
Lionel Richie. LL Cool J. Luke Combs. Marcus Mumford.
Maren Morris.
Morgan Wallen.
Pat Benatar.
The Black Keys.
A weekend full of superstar performances, never seen before collaborations, and once-in-a-lifetime moments you'll have to see to believe.
Friday, September 23rd and Saturday the 24th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas.
iHeartRadio, let's go!
Our 2022 iHeartRadio Music Festival.
Buy your tickets now at AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
The Pod Meets World podcast takes you back in time to 1993 for the ultimate Boy Meets World rewatch. Join original cast members Danielle Fishel, Will Friedle, and Ryder Strong as they relive every episode, sharing memories, behind-the-scenes info, and more.
None of us have seen an episode since it aired back in the 90s, so we'll be witnessing our middle part haircuts, hooded t-shirts, and teenage overacting for basically the first time right along with you.
You'll get a fresh perspective on all your favorite moments from the crew at John Adams High.
From the neighborly advice of Mr. Feeney
Two plays with squirrels.
To cutting my hair on TV for the very first time.
to that time I joined a cult.
We'll break down the good, the bad, and the nostalgic ugly.
Do it all over again with Topanga, Eric, and Sean. Your first crush, your first kiss, those world-shaking moments, and all those life lessons. It's everything a Boy Meets World fan could ever want. Listen to Pod Meets World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Your band has a lot of live albums. And I got to say, the one in the silver box is just unbelievable. And of course, it's different from what it was prior to the internet. You know, when live album was something rare, it was treated like a regular release. Now there's all this stuff on YouTube. You know, any thought, I mean, the Stones go on, put out a live album from every tour, but most people do not. Is there any thought about how many live albums, whether to put it out, not to put it out?
No, I think you should always put it out. If I mean, if you go to hardcore, I mean, the Grateful Dead, they're the ones where I think you should put, as long as the quality, if you believe in the quality, then, and if you're a great live band and you're always adding stuff, or you've got different versions, or then it merits it, I think, every couple of tours, let's say. And we're still from that thing. I mean, going back to when I said to you as a kid at sound checks, what did I learn at that scene bands? I mean, you know, you go to all these gigs and you see people who are good. And then you see bands that are artist bands, whatever, who are great. And the difference between good and great is colossal. Some people can make the room jump up and down. Some people can make the walls reverberate. Some people can, the gig finishes, you're still thinking about it 2 weeks later. And then there's other bands coming to play and you think, oh, that was good. And you don't think about it again the next day. Well, we knew from the early days what kind of band we would like to be in. And we still wrestle with that challenge, and we still document it, and that's where the live albums come in.
Okay, let's go back to your point about you can be selfish. Selfish has a bad connotation, but what you're saying is you need your alone time. Does your present girlfriend of long standing, does she respect that, or have you adjusted? Also, of course, there's the conundrum of needing your alone time and then getting on stage to thousands.
Well, first of all, the partner I've had for the longest time, we spend a lot of time apart. I'm in Sicily, she comes there a lot, but we have a place also in Nice. She has her own life there, bit of a business there, and never once has there been a complaint. She's busy. She does her thing, and when we see each other, it's great. When we're not with each other, we're doing our own things. We're grown up. We're adults. I think at a certain age, you should get smart about things. There has to be space. There's got to be space. And certainly for me, I get up. It's the irony. I thought I'd get in a rock and roll band because I could lie in bed all day, and I find that I'm wide awake at 5 a.m. Doesn't matter what it is. I never thought you would be able to listen to rock music or write rock songs at 5 a.m. Just doesn't seem the right thing. Believe me, you can. Your brain is sharp. It's clear. The rest of the world isn't up yet. You can get more done in those 3 or 4 hours than the rest of the day. I'm very protective now of that. I said selfish, but this is the stuff that brings home the corn. This is the stuff that puts food on the table. This is the stuff that puts a roof over our heads. That's the way it works. There has to be time. You got to read. You got to listen. You got to think. You have to have room to try things and get them wrong. It's a full-on commitment. And Charlie's the same now. His kids are grown up. It's a full. We go there Monday to Friday. We work Monday to Friday, and of course we don't have to do that. We don't have to in terms of being able to eat for the rest of our lives. We're into it. That's what it is. It's a sacred thing. If you have an art, it's sacred, and your art gets jealous. Your art gets jealous on you as well. If you stop doing that, the muscles, the creative muscles, and I believe there's such a thing. They're not long in disintegrating. It's hard to get back on a horse. So you really have to keep it. You can't do it half measures. And anyone around you, that's the deal.
Well, I certainly understand the selfish alone time. I mean, when I'm concentrated, I'm thinking I'm like 100% there. I don't like to be interrupted. And the average person just can't understand it because they're just used to going.
Well, I go for days without speaking to anyone. I mean, I just go for days without speaking to anyone. I mean, I'm also very lucky that there is people who put up with it. But I like a lot of time alone. I mean, in Sicily, as soon as I've done my 3 or 4 hours in the morning working, I'm up in the hills. Well, so you come back to a biblical landscape. The only sound up there is goat bells and crickets. But I don't meditate the way people, conventional meditation, but that is my meditation. You go walking, you hill walking, you get into a pace, you're breathing, problems come at the forefront. Before you know it, I've got an idea about that. I find all of that, that's the only way I know how to function. I mean, fortunately, I've asked my kids, because even, well, Dad, you were never there for us. They said, you were always there. You were always there. Somehow managed to make it work. But certainly in that thing, I mean, on tour, if it's a night off, I'll never go out with the band or anything. I go on my own. I go walk around the city, or I go whatever. At the gig between 4:00 and, after the sound check, to 8:00, I don't speak to anyone. I don't see anyone. The great thing about that, of course, you get to save your voice. And then when it comes time to spring into action and be present, whether it's on stage or whether it's participating in life with your friends or whatever, I'm fully there. I'm never there but not there, if you know what I mean. But that's the deal.
Exactly. So a lot of, they're legendary stories that people become successful. They buy their parents a house. They buy them a car. Did you do anything like that?
All of that. And it was with the greatest pleasure. I mean, I'll tell you a story here that's pretty good because, Richard Branson gets a bad rap, but I'll tell you this. So when I was living in, I told you I grew up in this high-rise flat. And even when the band was still touring and just starting to break through and being in the newspapers, being on TV, I think had our first hit. But we had all that debt to pay off, so we didn't have money. But I came back home, and I didn't have a place of my own to live because we were always on tour, so why would I? So I'd come back home and crash Mum and Dad's council apartment. Well, I came home, and the irony, because parents were always afraid when we got in this business there would be drugs around and we would all end up. They saw heroin before I saw heroin. Because at that time it came into Glasgow and it was starting to come into the housing projects and schemes. Anyway, I turned up and a couple of houses, had become hangouts for drug drug addicts and stuff. So I thought, now it's probably on about £50 a week then. And I'd heard about this, you can get a mortgage thing. And, and back then, of course, the bank managers, before the computer says no, the bank managers were kind of allowed to go on a hunch. And my manager at the time said, go along with the bank manager. Simple Minds, everyone in Glasgow knows Simple Minds. He'll know you and he'll listen to you. So I saw this house. Mum and Dad loved it. I couldn't say to my dad, incidentally, I was buying it for them because he had too much pride. I said it was for me and they would look after it while I was on tour, because it just would have felt wrong. So we saw this house. I think it cost 68 grand. Great part of Glasgow, garden, all of this, just beautiful. Can't believe it. No one from our family's ever had a place like this. So I go along to the bank manager and I think I'm all prepared. And he said, oh, Jim, yeah, my daughter loves you. And, she's been at the gigs. I know you're doing well and blah, blah, blah. What's going on? So I explained to him. I explained the situation. And he listens to every word. And he says, well, that's great. I know that house. I live in the area. I know the house you're talking about. Great. So great. How are we going to do this? And I said, well, the mortgage, we're going to look at a mortgage. He said, yeah, what are you going to give me? Meaning deposit. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, guarantee. I think I was 22 at the time. My guarantee, Bob, I took out all these live reviews that were saying, Simple Minds, band of the future, Simple Minds, they're going to be huge. Simple Minds. He looked at them and went, that's what you're going to give me, these 3 or 4 bits of paper. I said, yeah, look, it's we're happening. And he said, no, that's not how it works. You need to give me a deposit, 15, 20%. I said, well, I haven't got any money. He said, well, I don't know what to say. And as I was getting up, he said, do you know anyone with any money? And I said, no, I don't. Anyway, 2 days later, I got a call from him. He says, can't believe it. Richard Branson just phoned me. He's going to cover it. He's going to cover it. We're on. If Richard Branson's going to cover it, we're on. And to this day, I will always be thankful. I mean, we have the whole thing with record industries, and we know the record deals where you get screwed for it. People say, well, at least the bank, when you pay them back. Well, banks would never have given you money to make records, but Richard Branson did. And I will forever be grateful to him for that. So, yeah, all of the band looked after their parents and their stuff. And now it's to do with the nieces and the nephews and the sons and daughters, and we try to help out there as well.
So you have a new album in the pipeline. You obviously are making the music because you're driven to do that. What are your expectations? Most of your contemporaries, if they're still together, don't even put out new music. So you're doing this. Are you saying, well, this is what I do, the fans will like it? Or, there's the old paradigm of having a hit. Who even knows what a hit is today? Top 40, certainly in America, does not play this kind of music. They only play pop or hip hop. So I restate my point. What are your expectations?
Well, go back. If you have the music in you, you just have to make it. That's it. If you've got songs, how are you going to stop if it's still in you and still wants to be heard? When I say wants to be heard, I want to hear it. Charlie wants to hear it. We want to test ourselves. We're artists. This isn't just a scam. We're artists. We've been doing this since we're 14. We're 63. Been writing songs all our lives. What, are we just going to give that up when you love it, when you enjoy it, when it's how you see the world? No. But we know the realities, and you've just pointed out many of them. As it happens, again, with Simple Minds, we're very fortunate. Our records do break even. Okay, it's the hardcore, and they buy them in all the formats, but they're made with budgets, and it works. The biggest thing is it refreshes everything. Now, I know you're not going to go on tour and play the whole record, but if you've two killer songs that can, and think, if it's got to live up with your whole catalogue. And that's a great, great thing. It revitalizes everything, rejuvenates everything. And you get to feel that you're just not in a museum, that it's not just a museum. I mean, I know people do, and fair on them. They go around, but we're artists, we're creative people. So that's how we express ourselves. That's how there's always this thing of, one more swing at it. One more swing, maybe we'll write that song. And for us, it works. So there's no way up until now we've ever thought of giving that up.
What about the issue of playing that music live?
Well, as I said last night, on this tour, I got to tell you, we've been out for 4 months now. During the week, we played about anything between 4,000 or 5,000 people. And at the weekend, it goes up to 10 or 15. It's not bad. We play 23 songs. Right now, the new album isn't coming out to October. We play a couple of songs. Now, the songs we play are not the slow, moody songs. They're the songs with the big, chunky choruses that even if you don't know them, audiences go, I don't know this, but I like it. I'm getting it. So we play those songs, and we played one last night for the first time, a song called First You Jump. And today, among all our social networks, everyone's talking about it. Within our gang, everyone's talking about it. And we heard 20 seconds of the song. We heard this. It keeps the heartbeat going.
So we've had this whole COVID situation, but generally speaking, how much do you want to play live? How many dates in a year? And where can you play, and where would you not have an audience that you wish you could play?
Well, it was great the last few years to get back to America, because there was a point where I thought maybe that was not going to happen. And there was a tour booked there. Obviously, it didn't happen with COVID and all that, but it had the Radio Cities in it. I've got Simple Minds in Radio City. Wow, I didn't think that's something I would see again. And others. I mean, there is still something about us that I wish at the time we had appreciated more working in America, really getting, so much of that stuff is kind of mythical to us. We grew up with the movies. We grew up with the music. I love going to those old halls now that are refurbished, and you look at the people who played them, not just musicians, actors, and there's a guy in the band, a big Beatles fan. He'll go, the Beatles played here in 1963. I say, screw the Beatles. The Marx Brothers played here. I mean, I wish we had worked more in America now. We are getting the chance to go again. We will go again, but probably for us it would be better to hook up with another band, and if you're going there, you may as well try and get across to a bigger audience. That's about the only place that I wish we had worked more.
Tell me about two peak experiences, whether it be meeting someone, hearing your song on the radio, playing a gig.
Well, there's that great thing of meeting your heroes, and you should never meet your heroes, or meeting your heroes. And not only have I met many of my music heroes, I've got to even stand at a microphone with them. The ones that spring to mind is Peter Gabriel, who took us on tour in 1980, and, the humility and the sheer artistry of that guy. That was really something. Lou Reed, who we managed to do a cameo on one of our records. Well, to me, that's equivalent of having Picasso. I mean, that was just mind-blowing. But the story we tell a lot, we've got a great story, because for people of our generation, David Bowie was the guy. And I'll tell you a story of, you'll have heard of the famous studio, it's actually in Wales, called Rockfield Studios.
Yes.
And it's a country studio. So we were booked in to go there, and we turned up, and it's really rural. There's two studios, and we're booked into the little studio. And as we're turning up, we're thinking, I wonder who's in the big studio. I wonder what star's there. It was the most unlikely thing, but Iggy Pop was there. What Iggy Pop in the Welsh countryside. This is 1978. No, 1979 maybe. Iggy Pop's there. We're all Iggy fans. We can't believe it. But, turns out one of the guys in the band, Barry Andrews, we had met him on tour. He was a bit of a fan. So when the Iggy sessions were finished, he would come over and tell us what was going on. And at the time, Iggy was, I always get these confused, on the wagon. He was clean and he wasn't drinking and he wasn't anything. Well, until we turned up, that was. Because at midnight every night, it was almost like a cat creeping over the wall. He would come into our place. And we were young guys. We brought a lot of things with us to the countryside, including pretty girls and all the other goodies. And Iggy would come in every night. We just couldn't believe, we'd just sit at the feet of James Osterberg and it just agreed us. And one night he says something about, David's coming up on Saturday. And we're sure, I wonder if it's the David we're all thinking of, but yeah, David's coming up. Again, Saturday afternoon, there's a Bentley pulling up outside this country lane. Boy gets out. I think the album was being produced by James, I forget the other guy's name from the Stooges. Anyway, within hours, apparently there's chaos. Bowie's taken over. And all manner of breakdown. We're hearing this kind of through the wall. But we don't think we're going to be privy to any of it. And around about midnight, Iggy walks in again. And I can't believe it's a vision. It just seems so unlikely. Bowie's with him. He's wearing this black, we call them boiler suit, like a kind of industrial suit. He's got a tin of Heineken in his hand and a huge bit of cheddar cheese. It was the most unlikely. And they came in and they're looking for something to smoke. And and our crew have got plenty of that. And then Bowie said, tell you what, he's asking, what are you doing? What's this? He said, listen, we're working on this song. And we need a chorus. We need like a football chorus. We need a chant. We need 10 people. Why don't you all come in? So we get to traipse through into the next studio. I mean, can you imagine, Bob? None of us had a camera. No one had a camera back then. No one walked around with a camera. So we go in and Bowie's very much taken over. It's a song called Play It Safe. I mean, unless the record was there, I would still be thinking I was imagining all of this. It's so unlikely. But he gets us around the microphone and it's the chorus and everyone wants to jump in and sing this chorus. And bit by bit, Bowie starts saying, like, people who don't sing professionally step back. And at the point, there was only Iggy, Bowie, I can't believe I'm saying this, and myself standing at the microphone. And as I say, if that record hadn't been released with the credits on it, I could see people thinking that never happened. But it did happen. So that was a particularly great moment. But I think the moment that really tops it all was when we played, at the time, it was called the Nelson Mandela birthday party. It was his 70th birthday where they were still calling for his freedom. And we had a big part of that. We wrote a song for it. And lo and behold, again, less than a year later, Mandela walked out and he came to London to thank all the artists who were involved. And that was a really special moment because little Stephen Van Zandt was there, Gabriel Everett. You know, when you do those events and when you write those songs, you're fully committed, but there is a voice in your head saying, does it matter? Does it really matter? Can music really change world events? And to hear Mandela say, he explained to all, he said, listen, it was a great thing. He said, when there was no voice allowed, we somehow always heard the voice of the artist. Now, that might have been the writers, the poets, the painters, the songwriters. And that was quite an amazing thing. to be in the presence of him.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to call it a day today. Man, Jim, you're unbelievable. You're intelligent. You tell a great story. I could talk for hours more. I want to thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure, Bob. Keep up with good work. I love listening to the podcast. So many of the people you talk to, people who influenced me, or it's just wonderful. And there's so few places where we can listen to this kind of thing. So I say that really as a fan of the show and of the writings.
Well, I'm smiling broadly. People can't see that on an audio podcast. But till next time, this is Bob Lefsetz.